to effectively cease all hostilities, to definitively end the ongoing crisis, and to ultimately reach comprehensive agreements that truly serve the best interests of all parties deeply involved in this significant and complex conflict, in order to thoughtfully create long-term sustainable conditions for lasting peace between our respective countries throughout Europe and indeed across the entire world as a whole.
August 15th and sensational news, Putin is ready to cease fire. He will announce this at a joint press conference following the August 15th meeting in Alaska. And next week, a trilateral meeting between Zelensky, Trump, and Putin will take place in Vienna, Istanbul, or Geneva. Moreover, the delegations from the US and Russia, who will meet on Friday at 22:30 Kyiv time, are already known. So the American delegation includes US President Donald Trump, US Vice President G.D. Vance, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. As for the terrorists delegation, it includes Foreign Minister Lavrov, Presidential Aide Ushakov, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Murder Andrei Belousov, Finance Minister Anton Silvanov, and the head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund Kirill Dmitriev. The Russia-US summit will begin on August 15th at 11:30. The talks will take place at the Elmendorf Richardson military base. The meeting will start with a one-on-one conversation between Putin and Trump, with interpreters present. After their private conversation, they will continue negotiations over a working breakfast. After the president's private meeting, the negotiations will continue in a 5-on-5 delegation format. Lavrov, Ushakov, Belousov, Silvanov, Dmitriev, G.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Witkoff, Bessent. At the end of the meeting, Putin and Trump will hold a joint press conference for the media. Here is the most important insider information. At this press conference, Putin is expected to announce a ceasefire. Undoubtedly,
energetic and sincere efforts are being actively made to stop the ongoing fighting, to effectively end the current crisis, and to reach comprehensive agreements that are truly in the best interests of all parties deeply involved in this protracted conflict in order to create long-term and sustainable conditions for lasting peace.
After that, the following week, Trump will organize a meeting between Zelensky, Putin, and himself in Europe or Istanbul. In the media version, there is a video where Budanov has already gone to Alaska and is preparing an assassination attempt on Putin. All the insider information about the assassination attempt on Putin, the large-scale protests in Alaska, whether Putin will appear at the joint press conference and announce a ceasefire, and whether the meeting between Putin, Zelensky, and Trump will take place in Istanbul, Vienna, or Geneva. We will discuss all of this with the President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutaev, right now.
Dasha, good afternoon. I greet our esteemed viewers.
Ruslan Abgiyevich, right now a video is going viral showing Budanov arriving in Alaska and carrying out an important mission. Everyone is discussing the results of the negotiations, which will already be known by Saturday. In your opinion, will Putin officially cease fire? Will he announce it? Or will this not happen and will Trump face yet another humiliating defeat?
That's a very good question. Dasha, I want to remind our viewers of the following. From the very beginning, when Trump started this whole conversation with Putin regarding Ukraine, the issue was about a ceasefire. This is very important. The idea was to stop the war for 30 days, and during those 30 days, to find ways to interact, to hold some negotiations in order to reach some kind of agreement. The Russian side quite deliberately shifted this agenda. They pushed Trump aside and he swallowed it. Now, he doesn't talk about the ceasefire at all. That's the first thing. Second, we remember no one forced him. Trump personally said that if Russia didn't stop the war, didn't pause the war, didn't agree to a ceasefire by the 8th, then sanctions would come into effect. The sanctions were not imposed. They've also forgotten about them, forgotten about the ceasefire as well. And now Trump, well, this ceasefire in Alaska, or rather this meeting in Alaska is scheduled. What do we expect from it? To be honest with you, I genuinely do not expect anything at all, primarily because I simply cannot accurately predict the unpredictable behavior of Donald Trump. In any and all cases, it is certainly not just my own internal personal associations or merely my intuitive assumptions that are at play here. No, judging by Trump's actions, by his behavioral patterns, he can pull off anything at all. But we know he has some kind of inexplicable attraction to Putin. And if we carefully consider the experience of his first presidential term, specifically when he met with Putin in Finland in Helsinki, at that particular time he stood there looking like a thoroughly drenched goose with his head down, while Putin stood there like a proud Bengal rooster, absolutely full of himself and radiating confidence. In general, American experts, and as can be seen from various statements by the Trump administration itself, did not want Trump to meet with Putin one-on-one, because experience shows that Putin arranges these meetings in such a way that he does all the talking, Trump listens, and in the end, it turns out that Trump has just listened to Putin's lectures and then comes out and repeats the narratives that Putin has instilled in him. And so, well, we are optimists. We will think and believe that something good will happen. All the more, I want to remind our viewers about the phone conversation, the online conversation with the leaders of European countries. Including with President Zelensky in Germany when he was with Merz. In that conversation, the European leaders and President Zelensky of Ukraine made it absolutely clear to Trump that the decision regarding Ukraine is made by the Ukrainian people. And according to the constitution of Ukraine, only President Zelensky can voice it on their behalf, so that Donald Trump does not take matters into his own hands, and so that any potential agreements between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump will not have any legal force or binding effect. Frankly, that's why the Europeans said this, so that later Trump wouldn't have to backtrack and so that he wouldn't take on more than he can actually do. Therefore, unfortunately, these are the kinds of expectations that aren't entirely positive, and the feelings aren't entirely good either. But despite all this, I want to repeat once again, Trump understands this. No matter how much he pretends otherwise, he clearly understands Ukraine's position, he clearly understands Europe's position, and hopefully, in the end, he will rein in Putin. If the question is whether Putin will stop the war, whether there will be a truce or not, I am convinced there will be no truce. Even if, under some pressure, he announces that yes, he agrees, not even a day will pass, not even 24 hours, before the Russian side breaks this truce, blames Ukraine for it without any grounds, and they will still continue to wage war. Therefore, I think this meeting in Alaska will lead to nothing. Putin needs to be brought to exhaustion. Russia's economy needs to completely collapse so that they are unable to wage war. It's not that Russia, the Russian authorities, the Russian orcs will consciously make the decision that we realize, we understand we are criminals. No, they will never do that. They must become powerless. And the only truly effective way to decisively stop this ongoing war is to completely deplete them, their entire economy, their extensive weaponry, and at the very front lines, those crucial human resources that relentlessly carry out these brutal meat grinder assaults.
Ruslan Kutaev, there are two completely opposing opinions among international experts on this issue. The first opinion is that Trump would never have agreed to a meeting in Alaska if he hadn't received a preliminary agreement from Putin to a ceasefire. He would never have humiliated himself like that, stooped so low as to invite a dictator onto his own country's soil, only for that dictator to simply betray him and, at a joint press conference, say that he wasn't going to stop anything. That's one theory. The second theory suggests that, in reality, Putin and Trump will primarily discuss not the Russian invasion, but their economic interests, developing the Arctic and energy assets. Russia has enormous potential. Over 40% of the resources can be extracted there, these energy resources. Most likely, Russia will share them with the US, and there will be joint development of the Arctic. The second issue is Taiwan, and the third is a kind of deal, for example, building a Trump Tower in Moscow. And that's why Trump will focus on this, and then he'll say, well, I listened to Putin. Putin doesn't agree, so that's it. I'm washing my hands of it. I'm leaving the negotiation process. Which opinion do you lean toward more?
I am more than absolutely sure that it was always Donald Trump who was incredibly eager to meet with Vladimir Putin, and achieving tangible and significant results was never his top priority or primary objective. And we must assume that. Who precisely said that Trump is actively trying to achieve a complete victory for Ukraine, or even a partial one? He has never had any sympathy for Ukraine or Ukrainians. Frankly, he doesn't like the president of Ukraine. Trump went to that meeting, he was eager for it. Notice this is very important. It wasn't Putin who was eager to meet with Trump, it was always Trump saying, I want to meet with Putin. And he never truly made it a significant priority to effectively win that crucial round of complex negotiations with Vladimir Putin. So I want to unequivocally state that I fully and completely support the second highly insightful line of expert opinion. Trump will be there to discuss his own interests, the interests of his family. He will be profoundly interested in precisely how and in what specific manner he can become deeply involved in the vast Russian natural resources sector, and how, working closely together with President Putin, he and his entire family can collaboratively develop certain designated areas and indeed specific key sectors of the Russian Federation. But here another question arises. Trump doesn't care about Ukraine or the United States of America. He's focused on making money. But Putin needs Trump to bring him a capitulated Ukraine. The issue isn't about Trump. The problem is with Putin. It's Putin who sets the terms. Trump is fine with that. And here is where the position of the Ukrainian president, the positions of European state leaders, they are the stumbling block that prevents Trump from simply handing Ukraine over to Putin. That's why I think everything is correct here. I'm convinced that Trump spends more time. Why is he always eager to meet one-on-one with Putin? It's like he has some kind of obsession. For some reason, he wants to meet with him one-on-one. Why is he embarrassed by his own administration? And why, as protocol requires, doesn't his chief of staff or other officials attend these meetings? It's right there at the top, plain as day. He is now, and always has been, arranging his personal affairs without thinking about what might come of it. Of course, Trump will try to over-organize things. He'll try to sell this meeting to his American voters, that it's a breakthrough. There are already talks in the administration like, we're going to apply for the Nobel Prize now. Go ahead, give him 53 Nobel Prizes. It still won't make any difference with him. He's no diplomat, he can't do anything, and he can't make any real deals. He's just a troubled old man who, at the end of his life, wants to secure his family's future. Sorry, I'm speaking emotionally, but on this side, we're talking about the lives of an entire people, the fate of a nation. And yet he trades it all away so easily. He tries to please Putin as if it's all just a game to him. Let him please Putin with himself, with his own family, not at the expense of other nations, and stop meddling in Ukrainian affairs. Honestly, for Ukraine, it would be better if Trump and the United States just withdrew from Ukraine entirely. Let them deal with their own internal affairs. With Europe, Ukraine will establish its own defense, ensure the security of the Ukrainian people, and ultimately defeat Russia. I've been saying this ever since Trump first appeared. I'm afraid the time will come when Trump will openly support Russia, financially for sure. Look, this is important. I want the viewers to hear this. After all, there are all sorts of arguments about their meeting, about what they will talk about, that Putin will talk about territories. Putin will not talk about territories. Putin will talk about and demand that Trump ease these sanction-related burdens. And I'm afraid that under some pretext, he will go along with it. Russia's economy has collapsed. Putin needs the sanctions to be lifted from him. Here it's important to ask the right questions in order to get the right answers. And in this whole chain of actions, Trump is the weakest link. Can you imagine that? America is the strongest country. But in this entire process, negotiations, war, confrontation, the weakest link is Trump himself, the President of the United States of America.
Shamsuddin, European leaders have said that they feel like a footnote in history because they have no influence and do not participate in the negotiations. It turns out that Putin has split the NATO allies, the North Atlantic Alliance, because he meets with the NATO leader one-on-one, while the other NATO members just stand aside, hold separate talks, and have no influence at all. And Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, made a statement that if this meeting with Trump goes badly, it must definitely lead to something. Either Putin unconditionally ceases fire, or Putin is destroyed through sanctions. I would like to clarify with you what will happen on Monday. Do you think Europe will react, for example, if Putin doesn't agree to anything? Will additional sanctions be imposed on Putin's regime? Will Congress vote for secondary sanctions against China, for example? In other words, will they crush Putin, or will Putin outmaneuver them all again?
I genuinely believe that what will ultimately happen is that Donald Trump will in actual fact do absolutely nothing whatsoever to Vladimir Putin, despite the ongoing circumstances. These sanctions, even if it's important to say this is very important. Americans are pro-Ukrainian. Americans, his voters, the voters of the Republican Party, are putting pressure on the party and demanding open support for Ukraine because they have an open hatred for Putin, his regime, and for Russia. They openly say that Russia is a country that invaded Ukraine, and in this complicated situation, he will have to improvise, he will still have to do something. To rely on Trump, well, I like what Merz said. He didn't say it outright, but I understand what he left unsaid. Merz here, I'll say it. I'll allow myself to say what he didn't say but meant. At the very least, it will become clear to Europe, and they will no longer deceive themselves that by relying on America and the US, they can move forward as allies. This is exactly where the dividing line will be drawn. And here, Europeans may finally say, we shouldn't rely on America during Trump's administration, and Europeans must now autonomously, independently build their own course of action, a course that actively supports Ukraine, that will actively seek and mobilize their own internal resources so that Ukraine can defeat Russia. I think this is the reality of this point of view. This is a very important meeting. In the end, a bold red line can be drawn, where it can be clearly stated, where, in the broader context of international affairs, Trump can either be crossed out of the picture for the future or not. And this is very important. I think this is what is most anticipated right now. I don't think Trump will do anything to Putin. I'm afraid that, on the contrary, it is highly probable that Donald Trump will actually weaken some of these existing sanctions against Russia. At the very least, I can confidently and unequivocally state that Vladimir Putin will undoubtedly demand from Trump that the United States lift at least some of the current sanctions, or at the very least begin moving decisively toward lifting them completely. How will they justify this? I can't say. And I don't believe there will be a ceasefire. Even if they announce a ceasefire, knowing the two Chechen wars, knowing how the Russians behave, they will do whatever they want. They won't stop their military actions for even a second. And they couldn't care less that they've given their word or signed an agreement. The Russians don't care about that at all. These are people who are completely indifferent to those around them. They just look at the world around them and couldn't care less. For them, the most important thing is what they think. And they believe that all neighboring peoples and states should be under the Russian heel, because God is with them and they are close to God.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Vyacheslav Kamdych. The composition of the Russian delegation is significant. Yuri Ushakov, Andrei Belousov, Anton Siluanov, Kirill Dmitriev, Sergei Lavrov.
Well, we know that Sergei Lavrov and Kirill Dmitriev, these two are competitors, right? There were media reports that Lavrov actually drove Kirill Dmitriev away and didn't even let him sit at the negotiating table. These two, let's say, prominent and influential competitors are quite jealous about precisely how much Putin truly trusts them, or perhaps how little he actually trusts them. So, from this point of view, this is a breakthrough for Dmitriev. Dmitriev will now have exactly the same authority, if not more, than Lavrov. He will now be among Putin's entourage, among those who are the most... just look at the status of all the participants and look at the status of Kirill Dmitriev. None. No status. The only status he has is that he's a friend of Putin's daughter's family. That's a very significant status. And this is exactly what unites both Trump and Putin. These are people who would do anything for their family. Putin couldn't care less about Russia or Russians. He's a little czar who has ascended the throne and believes he should continue ruling over these serfs. Fortunately, we don't consider ourselves among them, which is why we fight against them inside Russia. And Trump is trying to emulate Putin and turn Americans into the same kind of material that Putin has made of Russians. That's why I think in this, let's say, in this move of Putin's, Dmitriev has prevailed, as well as Lavrov, and to be frank, Putin has delegated part of Lavrov's authority specifically to Kirill Dmitriev.
Vyacheslav Kamdych. Do the protests in Alaska matter on the day Putin arrives there? Does it matter, for example, if something happens, some kind of incident? Public events, Putin on the territory of the United States of America? Could there be any unforeseen circumstances? What do you think?
I think, first of all, they specifically chose Alaska because they truly understand that American citizens will indeed protest. And these Americans will certainly come out, especially in any major city. You see, out there in the absolute middle of nowhere, they deliberately chose Alaska. That's a calculated move as well. They meticulously planned it so that the entire world wouldn't visibly see Americans actively protesting against Putin. I truly think the American intelligence agencies have now done a considerable amount to thoroughly clear Alaska of any possible, let's say, significant demonstrations or public unrest. Even so, I don't rule out that there may still be some expressions of discontent, but it's a limited circle of people there. Everyone knows each other. You could count them on your fingers. So you shouldn't expect any major unrest or significant protests. But in America, in many American cities, I truly think that Americans will greet this particular meeting not with, well, let's say with considerable enthusiasm and a positive outlook. For many of them, in fact, a significant number of Americans consider it a profound insult that the President of the United States is actually meeting with Vladimir Putin, who is widely recognized as a fascist and a Nazi. This situation is deeply concerning to many citizens. Americans perceive this as an insult.
Vyacheslav Kamdic, do you think that next week there could be a meeting between Putin, Trump, and Zelensky? I don't know, in Geneva, in Vienna, or in Istanbul?
I don't know. For some reason, I truly think that Vladimir Putin, despite absolutely everything, let me just remind you a brief but important digression. Any of the prominent speakers, whether it's Sergei Lavrov, President Putin himself, anyone at all, or even Medinsky, they consistently and invariably end with one crucial sentence. Negotiations for peace and the cessation of the war can be definitively stopped on the explicit condition that the fundamental reason why this conflict, this war initially started, is thoroughly and comprehensively addressed. And what is that reason? The reason is that Ukraine and so on, the list goes on. Here they are. Crimea is theirs, the occupied territories are theirs, and so on. That Ukraine shouldn't build its own policy independently, there should be Kremlin-appointed governors there, and so on. We know this long list of demands. I'm sure that this meeting with Putin's meeting with Trump, will also end the same way. Even if Putin doesn't bring this up when meeting with Trump for his domestic audience, when he gives interviews, he'll circle back to this, repeating like a mantra that Russia hasn't changed its position, that it firmly stands by the principles it declared at the start, what they call the beginning of the conflict, the start of this war. They say we need to return to the root cause, to why, essentially, the war began in the first place. In this regard, unlike Trump, Zelensky is a thoughtful person, knowledgeable, and even able to read between the lines. He understands not just what is said, but also what is implied. And when two powerful and influential presidents attempt to forge a significant and impactful deal like this, as he explicitly states, some kind of clandestine, behind-the-scenes or secret backroom agreement, I genuinely do not believe that President Zelensky will willingly go along with it, and he absolutely will not fall for their deceptive trick or readily agree to meet, even if they diligently try to arrange such a crucial and pivotal meeting. I'm sure, they will assess the situation. Zelensky will once again meet with the leaders of European countries. It won't be his decision, but rather the decision of the European countries, of which Ukraine is one. And I don't think that the European countries will go along with this kind of backroom deal between Putin and Trump.
The leaders of European countries have presented Trump with 5 clear red lines that need to be addressed at the summit in Alaska, according to the Wall Street Journal. A ceasefire is a condition for further negotiations. Any territorial discussions must start from the current front lines. Western security guarantees, which Russia must accept. Ukraine's participation in the negotiations. Any agreement that may be reached must have the support of the US and Europe, including Ukraine. And Senator Graham, who regularly criticizes Putin and threatens Russia with sanctions, interestingly, that's how American experts describe it, responded to the question of whether he would attend the summit in Alaska. "No, I won't go. I'm afraid Putin will take me with him to Russia," the politician is quoted as saying by journalist Alex Rufoglu. Of course, there's nothing funny about this. And undoubtedly, the White House is prepared for the possibility of Trump imposing sanctions against Russia. Not that he wants to, but they are ready. Just remember, I was quoting there. Those were all quotes from American and European media. What do you think?
I'm not sure that Trump, well, just for appearance's sake, because they've speculated so much about these sanctions, I wouldn't rule out that there might be some very watered down sanctions, just in name only, some kind of symbolic ones. Maybe Trump will make some gestures. And that's not my claim. I'm not asserting it. I'm genuinely afraid that Donald Trump will actually make significant concessions and at least promise Vladimir Putin that there will be some easing of the existing sanctions against Russia. So this is precisely why, allow me to thoroughly explain why I am stating this. This is because President Putin, in his strategic calculations, agreed to this crucial meeting solely and exclusively in order to achieve the significant objective of getting these incredibly burdensome American and European sanctions, if not completely lifted, then at the very least substantially eased, because it is absolutely and fundamentally essential for his nation's interests. The economy has completely collapsed. And that's why this is a very serious issue, a most serious issue. And here the question of sanctions will be the answer. How much Trump was able to listen to Putin, how much he was able to set his own terms and outplay him under those terms, and to what extent he simply went along with Putin. And how can this be determined? If Trump, as he promised, follows through with these sanctions, even if only in a weakened form, in that case, Trump still defended his position. But if Donald Trump starts telling us, no matter what he explicitly says, but genuinely tries to convince us and the American people that economic sanctions against the Russian Federation should be eased, then in that case he has completely caved to Putin. And Putin has achieved exactly what, in fact, he went to this meeting in Alaska for.
It has become known who will represent the American delegation at the negotiations in Alaska. The delegation includes U.S. President Donald Trump, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Following the meeting, Putin and Trump will hold a joint press conference. Samfonovich, what do you think of the delegation from the United States of America?
Well, at the very least, it's a very serious and significant delegation. He brought absolutely everything he possesses. He certainly wouldn't bring that alcoholic, the defense minister, after all. And that's understandable. And these two, Witkoff and Kirill Dmitriev, are like two peas in a pod. They are the ones who carry the most intimate thoughts of the two presidents, the US and Russia. They are the bearers, transmitters, and consultants of these ideas. And of course, nothing can happen without them. I wouldn't be at all surprised if, when they meet together one-on-one, Kirill Dmitriev and Witkoff are also there, present with them, because these two influential individuals really are the crucial link that carries and handles the most secret and highly confidential matters and sensitive information that Putin and Trump agree upon and discuss. And there is not the slightest doubt that they are playing their own separate games. And so, yes, the delegation is very serious.
And I'll finish today's stream with a statement from the American Institute for the Study of War. The Kremlin is trying to present the summit in Alaska as a new Yalta, Russia as a world power equal to the US, and Putin as equal to Trump. That was a quote. Russian officials like Kirill Dmitriev are comparing the meeting to the Yalta Conference of 1945. He claims that a meeting between the heads of the Kremlin and the White House could prevent a global conflict. That is also all a quote. The deputy chairman of the State Duma Committee on International Affairs, Chepa, called on the US and Russia to engage in a friendly dialogue, while the head of the Occupation Administration, Gauleiter Aksionov of the Crimean Occupation Administration, invited Trump to visit the occupied Crimea to conclude a new Yalta peace. Russian propaganda is blaring that people who influence global processes will gather in Alaska. In conclusion, of course, we will meet with you right after or during the meeting in Alaska. Comment on this terrifying propagandistic nonsense.
Everything the Russians desire, they sell to Russia. They sell these very ideas. Indeed, right now, they want to present this meeting as one between two, let's say, powerful states that will divide the world. This is very important. Here, Trump is essentially legitimizing Putin. Besides, from the very beginning, you set the right tone for our conversation today. What does it consist of? As for Ukraine, I'm afraid that if they talk about it at all, it will be very little. They'll talk about, just trust me, and we'll see this soon. Trump and Putin will say, we discussed the international situation, the nuclear threat, we have prevented some possible third world war. Why is this necessary? It's necessary in order to turn Putin from an enemy, a fascist, a criminal, into a political figure, someone who is acceptable to deal with. And Trump is exactly the person who will present it as, look, Putin and I have come to an agreement. This is Russia's agenda specifically. It's Putin's team who will be pushing this from the very beginning. When they presented their program, their agenda for the future, they included this as well. They meet supposedly about Ukraine, but they add in, we will discuss ecology, we will discuss international security in terms of nuclear war. Why is this necessary? What for? It's all ridiculously simple, really simple. A ceasefire. They come, sit down and say, will there be a ceasefire or not? But they don't. They do all this to elevate Putin's status, to show that Putin is solving global issues, that Putin influences global decision-making. That's the whole point of all this. Basically, what I'm saying is that Putin wants to get the sanctions lifted, and he will insist on it. And here's the second point, if not the first, that Putin's status here must change. That Putin is one of those people, and Russia is one of those countries that influences the world, the changing world order, the behavior of global players, and so on. That is the goal of this agenda. I don't know whether Trump is aware of this or not. I actually harbor significant doubts regarding the fundamental soundness of the thought processes and strategic decisions within President Trump's administration, primarily because nearly everything they undertake or implement appears to be executed in such an incredibly clumsy, remarkably inefficient, and profoundly foolish manner. They announce one thing in the morning, and by evening they change it. We remember when Witkoff was flying on the plane, Trump announced that everything was settled, the ceasefire was secured. Witkoff arrives and then everything changes back again. There they say that they've reached an agreement, that they're going to exchange territory. Dasha, dear viewers, listen to what Putin and Trump are doing. They're trying to swap one part of Ukraine's territory for another part of Ukraine's territory. By what right are Trump and Putin trading Ukrainian territory? And here there was a very interesting suggestion that Putin, or rather Trump, would propose to Putin that they should start developing rare earth materials on the occupied Ukrainian territory. They're probing these issues to see how people will react, how it will be received within Ukraine itself, how Europe will respond, and what the general perception will be. And now, with Trump's emergence, this business interest, shown in its worst, even criminal light, comes to the forefront. And as the President of the United States, he is introducing this into the world around him. Not the best, but the very worst kinds of business projects and international relations. So in this way, Dasha, I think I've expanded a bit on this question. So what am I trying to say? Yes, they will want it. The Russians will do everything they can. And of course, without a doubt, they will benefit from the fact that Putin and Trump are discussing the global situation, that they are deciding the world order, and that Russia has such authority and trust with America that they can make certain changes, including to the territories of the surrounding world. This is how, at the very least, propaganda will be sold within Russia itself.
The world is awaiting the outcome of the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. Right during the meeting and after it ends, we will go live and discuss all of this, including with Ruslan Kutaev. Friends, let us know in the comments what you personally expect from the Trump-Putin meeting, what outcomes and consequences you anticipate. Please like this video. In the comments, write a few kind words in support of Ukraine and the armed forces of Ukraine, and also let us know where you're watching from. President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutaev, Ruslan Kutaev, thank you very much. And see you after August 15th.
All the best. Take care.